It'll surprise nobody to learn that I live in an extraordinarily anti-Brexit bubble and have therefore seen a lot of people celebrating every setback for the project or every poll showing sifting support. These are generally accompanied by exultations about how we'll be rejoining soon, mixed into the general background of unprompted demands that we do it anyway. The thing is, though, that's not going to happen. And wallowing in that delusion makes you just as insane as the people who actually believed in Brexit. Alright, this is going to require some context, so buckle up. I'm going to try and explain this idiocy without getting too far into the weeds. Some of this will seem like irrelevant political wonkery, but I promise it'll all be important later when I get to the point. Firstly, Britain, the UK, is a European nation with severe delusions of grandeur that likes to play pretend to itself that it isn't European. The European Union, the EU, is a supranational organisation that uses pooled sovereignty to operate a massive economic and social project aimed at enriching Europeans and making us not do wars with each other. Now, for various reasons, the UK's Conservatives don't like Europe. And while the UK's populace is not heavily conservative, its establishment is extraordinarily conservative and doesn't have any qualms about lying and cheating to get its way. The European question has been gnawing at the Tories, the main UK Conservative Party, for decades, and in 2015 David Cameron, then Tory Prime Minister, promised to do a referendum on it, thinking he'd win it handily, thus burying the issue forever and making the annoying Brexit faction inside his party shut up and leave him alone. This did not go as planned. In fact, it backfired spectacularly. The Brexit faction used their victory to purge the Tory party of any dissent and install their chosen leader. Meanwhile, they also managed to generate significant acrimony as they ripped the UK out of the EU with little care to the consequences and then proceeded to establish a proto-fascist regime in the UK while constantly throwing around threats to the EU, threats to peace in Northern Ireland, and generally making the UK look like spoiled children. Now, they pulled this feat off by running a massive multi-generational propaganda campaign against the EU that leaves the people of the UK largely unable to understand the nature of that organisation. Running a slick campaign promising the sun, moon and stars, while the opposing campaign was lame, failed to articulate the benefits and largely threatened the sky falling, which was predictably dismissed as fear-mongering. Literally illegally cheating and then using executive power to prevent the authorities from taking action against themselves. Exploiting racism, nationalism, and the complete and utter failure of Britain to come to terms with the loss of its empire longer ago than the average age of Britons. They were aided in this by Labour's leadership, the other major party in our two-party system, which wanted its own form of Brexit, despite the party membership being generally against it. This frustrated attempts to set up a confirmatory referendum on the final terms and ultimately resulted in a general election, which the Tories claimed as a proxy for a confirmatory vote. Now, if that gives you the impression that it's all some kind of establishment coup against the people, you're half right. At the end of the day, there was a majority vote in a referendum for Brexit, and there was broad support in the populace. This is to be expected given the depth of propaganda deployed against the EU. I deliberately called out the bubble I live in at the start of the video, because I know people who voted Brexit, and I've had conversations with random people who did so. I know they're out there, and I know there are areas where it's the majority opinion. It's really important to realise that, apart from in Northern Ireland, which is a whole conversation I don't want to get into, Brexit has not been going well, and it's increasingly apparent that it's not been going well, regardless of what media you consume. That means that opinion has been changing. There may even already be a majority for rejoining. But simply wanting to rejoin and a government pretending to care about it is not enough. On a technical level, the UK would have a pretty easy time of joining because we just left. But there are a few really significant technical issues. The first is divergence, changing the laws in the UK to be non-compliant with EU directives. The Tories are really keen on divergence, but haven't really done any yet because the EU's response to divergence would be further trade barriers. Eventually they're going to do some though, and in order to rejoin, that would need to be undone. The second is, I'm not sure the UK meets the criteria for joining the EU, which we'll talk about in a moment. The rest of these technical issues relate to the fact that all of the UK's deals and concessions with the EU no longer exist. It would have to join as a fresh member. The EU has more recently preferred to harmonise its arrangements with member states to avoid the situation where different members have different opt-outs and responsibilities. The UK had a unique rebate where it got money off the money it was supposed to pay into the EU to cover its expenses. Paying to support the EU is something all member states do because obviously the EU does a bunch of stuff that requires money and somebody has to pay for it. The likelihood of renegotiating the rebate is basically nil. The UK should never had it and will never get it back. The UK will have to make a commitment to joining the euro at some unspecified future date. There won't be an opt-out on that. Now, whether the euro is good is a hell of a conversation I don't have time for, but the only thing that really matters is that the UK will have to commit to joining. But it doesn't ever have to actually join it. Then there's Schengen, which is the big free travel zone, and that's actually probably the thing the UK will get an opt-out on. Mainly that's because of the Common Travel Area, which is a long-standing free travel zone between the UK and Ireland, which I feel I need to state are separate sovereign nations. Ireland is already in the EU but not Schengen and would likely support the UK having the opt-out in order to maintain the CTA. It's also worth noting that because both are islands, there's not a huge value to the UK being in Schengen. It would simplify the ferry and train connections across the channel, but air, rail and ferry travel still generally features identity controls. So about those requirements, they're certainly subjective to a degree, and there are definitely member states that probably don't meet them, but they're already members, and the EU's mechanism for taking umbrage over such breaches is weak enough that everyone looks the other way. But there are 3 of them, and they go as follows. Stable institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and respect for protection of minorities. A functioning market economy and the capacity to cope with competition and market forces in the EU. And the ability to take on and implement effectively the obligations of membership, including adherence to the aims of political, economic, and monetary union. Call me pessimistic, but I don't think the UK meets any of those. If you squint hard enough, you could maybe argue it does, but the EU will be in no mood to grant the UK any leeway. That's really where we get into the big problem with the UK deciding that it wants to rejoin. The EU does not trust the UK, and it's primarily the UK's own fault. Let's start with that decades-long propaganda campaign. Now, it's not unusual for politicians in other European countries to blame the EU for things that don't work out, even though it's not the EU's fault. They're politicians, and it's a convenient scapegoat. However, the British press take this to a whole new level, vilifying the EU at every opportunity. The EU Commission literally maintains a page specifically debunking lies the British press tell about it. One of the most prolific and successful of the columnists just making stuff up to be angry at the EU over was none other than Boris Johnson, the Brexit Prime Minister himself. The thing is, the UK might not read Europe's papers, but Europe reads its. The EU knows that any groundswell of support can be easily undermined by the UK establishment's propaganda machine, so it will want to see an absolutely undeniable support for Rejoin. But it reaches much deeper than popular support. The UK's government has spent the entire time since the referendum lying, dissembling, and stalling for time when it should have been working with the EU to establish a future relationship. It frequently said one thing in negotiations and then immediately turned around to its domestic audience and said the opposite, or claimed it would renege on any deal as soon as it came into force. Indeed, since Brexit actually happened, the UK has repeatedly threatened to tear it up or use its emergency powers to achieve wholly internal political aims, the international implications of which would have made the UK a pariah state. The message is clear. Perfidious Albion cannot be trusted. Then there's the schemes the Tories have tried to use to achieve a nuclear option Brexit, such as lying to the monarch to suspend Parliament for an extraordinary period so that the ultra-executive could push through Brexit without scrutiny by a more moderate legislature, which has since been purged. We might well see a party brought to power on a promise of rejoining with popular support at its back. But what good is that if 5 years later it's replaced by the Brexit ultras once more? The EU will want reform of the British system. It will want a commitment from the UK to a European future, from a government capable of giving such a commitment. The EU will want to see stability. It will want to deal with a UK that can be relied on, that won't change its mind on a whim, that won't tear up a deal it has just signed. It's hard to see this being achieved with good old-fashioned civility in politics. Just look across the Atlantic. Joe Biden is courteous and genial. His entire platform was to make politics nicer and more civil again, and everything would be fine. But it's a lie. The system is broken, and no amount of fresh paint can fix it. The UK will not achieve the stability we need without governments that can actually fix the problems at the root of its desperation for change. It will not achieve trustworthiness without governments that are focused on the issues that are generally supported by the populace rather than their own perverse obsessions. It will not achieve honesty without clearing out the brazen corruption within the political system, without reforming editorial control of the British press. The system itself has to change. And once it has, it will need to produce a new vision of the UK's future, built on an honest appraisal of its present, formed from an acceptance of its past. I'm sure this is pretty depressing for the people who are really invested in Rejoin, or who are just despairing of the state of the UK and see it as a way to buoy the economy. It needn't be so, though. Just as the Big Bang approach to leaving the EU was needlessly harmful, so also a Big Bang rejoin effort isn't necessary. The EU would be likely to accept re-entry into the customs union and single market by the UK. This would ease the economic and logistical problems caused by Brexit, even if not entirely restoring everything that had been lost. This would come with trade-offs, of course. The UK in that position would be the vassal state Brexiteers complained it was pre-referendum, even though it wasn't actually at the time. This would, however, ensure a lack of divergence and provide economic stability that permitted the UK to work on itself in order to reach a position where rejoining is realistic. It would also lessen the threat of the UK disintegrating by removing the Irish Sea customs border and reducing Scottish dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. Rejoining might take 10 or even 20 years, more or less a generation, but it is something the UK can aspire to if it's willing to put in the work. What it absolutely shouldn't do is push for immediately rejoining, resulting in a rebuff from the EU, which simply drives its jilted populace further into the arms of oligarchy. Well, that certainly was a lot of words, and I have absolutely skimmed over a lot of the detail because, well, it's a deep subject. I hope you have a good idea of the challenges involved in rejoining, though, and maybe this will help you understand when and where to call for it. I'd like to ask that if you did find it helpful, you hit the like button. I'm probably going to get a lot of awful comments from both sides over this, but do leave one if you have one. Check out some of my other videos. It's mainly motorbikes, but you might enjoy other parts of the Soapbox series. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. Don't forget to hit the bell. And if you'd like to reward me for this effort, you can find my Ko-fi link in the description below.